So the most popular question right now in the media about the Fed is, will the Fed hold the rates high until the end of the year 23 or whatever, further even, or will it cut? But that's not even like the real question. I mean, they ask that question as if the Fed is sitting like at his desk and like posing that question to the ceiling, like, oh, should I hold or should I cut? That's not the real question. The real question is, does the Fed wish to hold rates long until everything is super clear to him and like no inflation and all of that super fine and dandy and like perfect? There is no way to go wrong about this before they cut. Yes, of course the Fed wishes that. That's what they wish. They already made, or at least been accused of making one mistake of misinterpreting the inflation originally and calling it transitory and not acting for the entire year 21 until the late after Thanksgiving, basically, when they announced they will start increasing rates like 3 months later or 4 months later, whatever time you want to put in it. And meanwhile, they will start slowing the QE, remember? So that was interpreted by bond market and the media and mouthpieces in the media for the big businesses and institutions who trade bonds as losing the face by the Fed, like misinterpreting, making a mistake, basically, at the expense of the people. Right? That's the argument that they started using, which basically gave away their personal interest that they are within the trade and they're just trying to make money. But back to the question, does the Fed really wishes now to hold the rates high? Yes, of course it does. They're bureaucrats, so they entered this mode. They went to the panic hiking for 75% for 4 times, and then they added 50. Like, they're trying to make this like visually pleasing, symmetrical process that everybody can basically accept, and they can look like they are in control and all of that, and they know what they're doing, and they actually like have a goal and understanding of. Nobody does. That's the thing about big economy. Nobody really has any clue or understanding. Everybody's kind of poking finger into the atmosphere and trying to figure out and sense which way the wind is blowing. But hey, the wind does change from time to time. Anyway, so the real question is, does the Fed wish to hold the rates high and maybe raise it a little bit higher if they can, and really like affirm that this is gonna be completely destroyed, this inflation thing, which in my view not even like a real question, because inflation always there, and they now only started to act on it when wages started to grow. And in normal day-to-day life, obviously wages, when they go higher and people get more pay, people who go to work, they can actually use that money to deal with inflation, right? And so it's maybe a problem in the grand scheme of economic thinking when it's a fundamental issues that force the economy to go into that route. But in this case, we had artificial COVID lockdowns, which created disbalance in the system and disbalance within the economy, and this disbalance will be corrected. So in my view, at this point, I'm in a super minority, but the Fed was correct. It is transitory. You just have to give it enough time to really settle itself. He was hoping it will settle, but the year passed by. It didn't seem like it was settling, so they gave in to the prevailing screaming of people who just wanted to make a big trade and make money for themselves, who don't give a care about inflation or people or whatever. Anyway, so what's the alternative if the Fed wishes to hold the rates very high, very long, until the situation is mega clear that it's done and done, and nobody's gonna blame the Fed for cutting anymore? What can prevent them from doing it? Well, obviously not something that anybody wishes to have, but something will break in the economy, right? So it's either they wish to keep it long and high, or something will force the Fed to cut it. Now, if you go back to 2020, which is not too far from now, and yes, people have very short memory, but it's not that far from now. You remember when the COVID happened, the scare, right? And the market kind of dropped basically in March 2020. And then the Fed announced the zero rate policy. That was viewed as a confirmation of a crisis, basically, and the market went down again. So that's how things are interpreted usually. So if the Fed comes out and raises the rates, cuts the rates at this point now, in 23, in response to some hypothetical financial crisis or other, doesn't really matter what will cause that desire to save the economy, because the real problem is it's a disbalance created by COVID shutdowns, because some industries were closed and some industries continued to operate. And those industries that continued to operate, they started to develop supply problems over time, because some companies were closed, and at some point the supply chain reaches those companies, they need them and they don't make it, so prices started to rise, started to more difficult to get things, and then it was reopened suddenly in chaos without any structure or a plan, and everything went shortage, and supplies and the people and everything, and a lot of people started to do gig work in the meanwhile, so they didn't even come back to the labor force. So disbalance, right? And it's a sector disbalance, like healthcare, for example, and pharmaceuticals, and certain other like discretionary, like supermarkets, like Costco, for example, they stayed open. So they did not have a COVID shutdown. What they had eventually some logistical problems of acquiring certain raw materials that started to affect their production and some stuff that they make, and their prices too, because they had to pay more for shipping, for acquiring those materials. So it started to build up, and then other companies that were actually shut down, and they actually were hurt by all that, and it cost them a lot of money to bring it back to online, and a lot of people were paid more money because not many people even came back to the labor force. So sectors of the economy were hurt, okay? And some industrials were open too, like some industrials that make things like filtration and avionics, because those things needed anyway, and they just didn't really shut down completely, like compared to other sectors which shut down completely, right? And basically needed to open from scratch, which is always a difficult situation, tough task, right? And expensive. So this disbalance continues now, right? So now it's been a year of rates increases, right? It's gonna be March soon, and they started in March with a 25%. And over this year, they really went really high, almost reaching 5%. What is it, like 4.5 right now? And they will definitely go higher next month, at least by 25. I mean, there's like, just to make a pure symmetry, Fed likes that. They will add 25, just start with 25 and end with 25, and then we'll see whatever they can manage later. They want to go higher. They want to. and they want to keep it longer. The question is, will they be able to? That's the real question. So, but disbalances were created. So meanwhile, in this year that passed, 2022, we've seen that expected effect of the hike rises, they don't really seem to come up. Labor market holds, consumer spending holds, but some other things drop, like housing prices and things that support building the housing and all that. So sectors of the economy doing fine apparently, but sectors of the economy are not doing fine. And now if we look back at the shutdown, we'll see that the same sectors that stayed open and been making money and continued to work and operate pretty much as normal, except their costs were slowly increasing more and more and more, and developing issues with supply chain. Those sectors continue to be looking strong and make look like American economy is strong. But on other sectors that were shut down and now showing weaknesses, they continue to show weaknesses, and they will or already are in the recession. So we will have, on top of disbalances created by lockdowns in the economy, we will have disbalanced recession. Sectors of the economy will not have recession, and sectors of the economy will have recessions. But guess what? When sectors of the economy go into recession, just like with shutdown, eventually it starts to affect other sectors, and sooner than later, by the way. And just like we started to develop supply chain issues and prices increases for raw materials and such during the shutdown, now we will start having issues with recession spreading into healthy sectors of the economy. And so the Fed will still be forced to react to that. And that's why bond market understands it, and they simply bet that in 2021 February they will sell a lot of bonds and short the market. And now they are buying the bonds, which are depressed in price, cheap, and they're making money on both ends. And they know that the Fed will be forced, not because they make a choice to do or not to do. No, they will be forced. But when that forced comes through, and that's where it concerns the stock market, people making bets that the Fed will cut the rates and it will magically shoot the stock market through the stratosphere. Yeah, it might eventually, but first, most likely, the market will crash, because everybody will think the Fed telegraphing that the economy has tanked. And they have, after saying for almost entire year, like since the panic hiking of summer 22 until whenever that time comes, this spring 23 or summer 23, doesn't matter. When that time comes and the Fed will be forced to cut in the response to save the economy from the deep dive into Mariana drop of recession, the people in the market will use that opportunity to short it and get scared, because I'm talking about equity market now, because they will think, after talking a year that we are in control and we are hiking and the economy is strong and it will withstand and a soft landing and all that stuff, all of a sudden they cut rates out of the blue in the middle of, in between meetings, most likely, probably too, and that's gonna be panic and it's gonna crash. Then it will shoot through the stratosphere eventually, as it always does after. But so we have to just be mindful of these things, and that's why I brought the example of 2020 when the Fed cut rates to zero, market crashed because of that. Even though it's like seemingly that's supposed to be supportive, right? Which it was later, but not at the instant. So have to be careful when we want to make those trades in the equity market. I guess that's my point.